Hey everybody, Mr. Lowe here again. This week we're talking about subtracting integers. So if you remember last week, we talked about adding integers. And that could have been adding positive numbers, it could have been adding negative numbers, or adding a mix of positive and negative numbers. So I'll give you just an example of last week. Some that we did would be like 5 plus -4. We learned a couple different ways that we could model this. One was the positive counters and the negative counters. So we'd make 5 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we could make 4 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we learned that these opposites make 0 pairs. So that's 4 zeros, right? So that is 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, which is 0. And then I'm left with 1 positive. So my answer would be 1. I could also show this on a number line. And I would go from 0 to 2, 3, 4, 5. So I go from 0 to 5. So that's my first addend. And then I would go back 4 spaces, count 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would end, fill those in. That would end right at positive 1. Okay, so that's 5, -4. Now, hopefully you were kind of realizing through this that this is almost the same as subtraction, right? Because 5 plus -4, that equals 1. Well, hopefully you're kind of realizing that that is the same as 5 minus 4. So this is going to be really important to remember as we're starting to do subtraction of integers, because once we are doing that, we're going to change every subtraction of integers problem to an addition problem. And I'll just tell you that it's going to make it a lot easier if you remember to do that. So the main thing I want you to remember today is when we are subtracting integers, you are going to add the opposite big letters underlined. You're going to add the opposite. Now, if you take a look at these two examples that I just showed, well, 5 minus a positive 4. So what it means when I add the opposite is it's going to turn back into this problem up here. So 5 minus 4, I'll write that again. This is a positive 5, this is a positive 4. What I do when I add the opposite is I change this sign to an addition symbol. So I'm going to go 5 plus, and then I'm going to go, what's the opposite of positive 4? Well, the opposite of positive 4 is -4. So I can change it back to this problem here. And these both give you the answer of positive 1. So that is what we are going to be working on today. Now, I'm going to give you some steps to make sure that that will work every single time. So we're going to have some rules for subtracting integers. So I'm going to make it just like a little notes here. So rules for subtracting integers. Make it pretty. So the first thing you're going to do is leave the first integer the same. So let's use a different example. So let's say, for instance, I have a question that looks like this. -3 minus 1. So that's my example. So rule number 1 is keep the first integer the same. Okay, so I don't do anything. Nothing happens. I just keep this one the same. That doesn't happen. The second thing that we need to do is we're going to change the subtraction sign to an addition sign. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So now I'm going to rewrite it just with what I have so far. So I have -3 plus. Okay, that's steps 1 and 2. I keep the first one the same, then I do that. Number 3 is I change the integer after the subtraction sign to its opposite. So remembering that this is +1, so a lot of people will get confused and think it's -1, right? But it's a -3 minus a +1. So we're going to change the integer after the subtraction sign to its opposite. Okay, so we should remember from last week that opposite is just whatever the opposite is. So if it's positive, the opposite is negative. If it's negative, the opposite is positive. So since this is a +1, like I was mentioning before, we're going to add a -1. So now I've rewritten the problem to an add the opposite problem. Now this should just look exactly like what we did last week. I can use any of those strategies that I want to solve it. So step number 4 is I am going to use the addition rules for adding. So, sorry, I'm going to follow the addition rules for adding integers with the same signs or different signs. Okay, and then we're going to go back. Make sure. Okay, I'm still on the screen there. You guys can see that. And so we're going to follow the rules, and I'll do it both ways. So remember, if the signs are the same, it's a negative plus a negative. I'm just getting more negatives, so that would be -3 plus -1 is going to be -4. If you're not comfortable just having that memorized yet, remember we always can go back to those strategies that we learned. So I can go 1, 2, 3 minuses. I have another minus. I can't cancel anything out or have a zero pair, so I just have 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. I can use my number line. So 0 to -3, so -1, -2, -3, -4. So I'd go 0 to -3. And then I go one more in the positive, or one more in the negative direction. So I end at -4. But just thinking, okay, I'm on the negative side. I have 2 negatives. I'm getting more negatives, so I'm going to be at -4. So just remembering, if you're adding integers with the same sign, it's going to be whatever it is. So this is 2 negatives, so it's going to be negative. So hopefully that makes sense. I was going to do one more example if I'm subtracting a negative number, because that's where we get confused. So I'm going to flip this over. Remember, you can pause or rewind or do whatever you want to this video. So I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to do one more example. So what if I'm subtracting a negative number? So what if I have 4 minus -2? Well, the same rules apply. What are we going to do? We're going to add the opposite. Why am I writing that so big? Because I want you to remember it. So we're going to add the opposite. So number 1, my first integer stays the same. Step number 2, I make this subtraction in an addition. Step number 3, I change this number to its opposite. Well, what's the opposite of -2? The opposite of -2 is +2. So now I've rewritten my problem. Well, this one we shouldn't need to do any models for because this just goes back to our first and second grade math. Well, what's 4 plus 2? Well, 4 plus 2 is just 6. So just as simple as that. So if I'm subtracting a negative, I'm getting more positive. So if I subtract -2, I'm actually adding 2. So it's as simple as that. Hopefully that makes sense. As always, you can email or comment below for any questions that you may have on this video. But the big thing to remember is what? Add the opposite.